I have made the case before that a nationalist victory is inevitable. It is not if, but when. But we do not know when. This is a problem, because nationalists might find themselves with a victory that they cannot handle, and some might prefer defeat to that. For example, when Donald Trump won in 2016, nobody was prepared for it, so there was no infrastructure in place to support him. Thus, the deep state fought him at every turn, eventually stealing the 2020 election to get rid of him. Brexit was similar. The idea of having that referendum was relatively sudden, and then the result was relatively unexpected, such that most of the people in charge of making it happen were against it. Nationalists need a game plan for what to do in case of victory. When COVID struck, people drew attention to a Rockefeller paper from around 2010 about a novel coronavirus from China and the global response to it. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when people like the Rockefellers or Bill Gates wargame out improbable scenarios in advance, then they do not need to waste time deciding what to do when they happen. There are people who have already wargamed out what to do in case of a nationalist victory. Nationalists cannot let the Rockefellers, or whoever else, implement their plan while they, the nationalists, are still on the drawing board. For example, I was thinking to myself about how nationalists could reform the system to prevent the corruption that is now present. One issue is the incentive not to achieve election promises. If you promise to do X, and people vote for you, then once X is done, they do not need you any longer. Therefore, do not actually do X despite people voting for you to do it. What if there was a system where you penalize parties for not delivering on their election promises? For example, the parties could state 5 top things to do, and if they failed to deliver them, then their votes at the next election could be docked by 10% for each one that they failed to do. So they could lose 50% of their vote at the next election if they screw up. The trouble is that this would give more power to the deep state. The deep state could sabotage any government it did not like. That government would then lose 50% of its vote, a new government would get in, that the deep state likes, and that one would be made to work efficiently and deliver its promises. For example, the anti-immigration party gets in at an election. All of their immigration policies are stymied by the deep state. They lose the next election to the pro-immigration party. The deep state works efficiently with the pro-immigration party, and so the issue of immigration is not solved. This could lead to a situation where there are multiple deep states, with the current one being purged with each new change of government in order that the government can get its policies through and not be punished at the next election. More and more time would be spent trying to undo what the previous lot did and sabotaging everything in case the next lot gets in instead. Meanwhile, the apolitical operations of the deep states, like the civil service, etc., would suffer. The cadre of people who would have been there for 20, 30, 40 years and know everyone and how everything works would be gone because they would keep getting purged and reinstated at intervals. The deep state would go from being disloyal and competent to loyal and incompetent. What if instead of changing the government and the deep state, neither of them changed? What about a permanent right-wing part of the country and a permanent left-wing part? The people can live in whichever one they like the best. Peaceful separation, as Jared Taylor would put it. If you were conservative, then you could live in the conservative part. If your children were leftists, then they could move to the leftist part and not change the conservative part where you live. But then myriad questions arise. How do you decide where to draw the lines between these parts of the country, and who will have to move? Will the more productive half of the country be satisfied to subsidize the other half? If one population grows and the other shrinks, does the border change? Are you going to need 2 of everything, or will there just be one hospital in one part which is used by patients from both parts? Will leftist builders who go to a building site in the rightist part of the country be subject to rightist rules or leftist rules? What if there is a rightist enclave in a leftist zone? What if nobody moves anywhere and there's a worker shortage in one place or the other? And how many jurisdictions should there be? Is just one split enough, or should there be more? Should it be just along left and right, or nationalist and globalist? Should there be ethnic and religious splits? Or is it easier not to split at all? These are just examples, but they demonstrate that things cannot be figured out on the fly. Some may say that it is getting ahead of oneself to consider them. We should focus on the victory, not the victory parade. But this is not about the parade. This is about winning the peace that follows the war. If you do not win the peace, then you might as well not have won the war sometimes. Iraq in 2005 is what happens when you do not win the peace in 2003. Perhaps 2003 was what happened when the peace was not won in 1991. Nationalists are in a war and will win. Then they will be confronted with a peace. If they have no plan for it, then it will go to whomever has a plan. When COVID struck, those with no plans defaulted to those with plans, be they the World Health Organization, Bill Gates, whomever. There is no point in nationalists winning the war, only to default to globalists during the peace. We seem to be living that outcome right now.